We are being redirected to the YouTube channel. We can start now. Good morning and good evening, everyone, and happy to start the fourth day of the 5th USP BRICS Conference with the topic Environment and Sustainability. We have with us today Igor Tostes Fiorezzi, researcher of the BRICS USP, Sergei Kirillov, PhD candidate of the School of International Relations of St. Petersburg State University, Professor Elizabeth and Almeida Meirelles, Professor of Public International Law at USP and specialized in international environmental law. Also, we have with us today Barbosa, Professor of Public International Law at USP and coordinator of the BRICS. Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ramon, Baptistella, and good morning and good evening and good afternoon for the Russian colleague. It is, I'm glad to be part of the fourth day of the 5th BRICS Seminar 2021. Again, this year we had to make it online. I hope we can do it in person, viva voce. It is always more interesting, and we can exchange views and talk also before and after the conferences. But due to the circumstances of the pandemic, it is important to keep things going. And this is something which we are glad to have the participation of so many colleagues of the 5 BRIC countries, and to have a topic this morning that could not be more timely than environment and sustainability. This weekend, we will start the Conference of the Parties on the Climate Change Convention in Glasgow, Scotland. And this is a programmed disaster for Brazil due to the circumstances of the present government in view of this topic. So this is something which we have to be aware of, we have to discuss, and we have to state our positions and our commitment towards protection of the environment and towards greater sustainability. Professor Elizabeth Meirelles, my colleague of the International Comparative Law Department of the Law School of the University of São Paulo, is an expert in the subject. She has long worked with the subject, and it is important to have this view combining colleagues from different BRICS countries. So Sergei Kirillov, you have the responsibility of bringing the Russian view on the topic, and Igor also on the Brazilian side. So this is a pleasure to be part of this panel, and Ramon Baptistella will conduct the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I would like to thank the partners also, FGS, BRICS, Sabia, CRB, Litina, UAB São Paulo, especially the Commission of International Relations Commission, the Embassy of India, the Embassy of China, and especially Burkina for the help and support with all the event. Now I would like to pass the word for Igor Tostes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon. Good morning, everyone. Good evening also. My name is Igor Fiorezzi. I'm a student at the University of São Paulo, and I'm a researcher at the Center for BRICS Studies since 2019. First, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. I'd like also to welcome our panelists today. It's a pleasure to be here to share these opinions with you. I'd like to thank you also everyone who has been following our event this week. And the theme of my talk today will be climate change litigation and approach for BRICS countries. I'll start to share. Okay, let's start. I'd like to start with a first definition of what is climate change litigation that is proposed by two American scholars in 2012. In this, climate change litigation can be defined, I quote, as any piece of state, tribal, or local administrative or judicial litigation in which the party feelings or court decisions directly and expressly raised an issue of fact or law. This definition is important as it was one of the first definitions of the phenomenon that had been taking place since the mid-2000s. But it's important to say that it has some problems. This is because it leaves out cases in which climate change element is not the main one, but only the incidental one. And this can exclude important cases and actions, particularly in jurisdictions where climate change litigation is still starting. So, as this definition has some problems, I will propose a second definition. This definition was elaborated by three Brazilian scholars, and it's much wider. According to this definition, the term climate change litigation is used to describe a set of judicial or administrative litigation cases related to greenhouse gas emissions reduction, which we call mitigation, vulnerability reduction, which we call adaptation, remedying of damages associated to climate change, which we call loss and damage, and management of risks related to climate change, we call risk management. As you can see, this definition uses the claim type instead of the presence or absence of the climate change element, so it can also be interesting. And still, there are many other possible definitions for this object, which will not be presented. My aim today is to show that there is still not just an exact and exclusive definition, and there isn't a consensus on the right definition. We have much possibilities. As an example, I bring here the case Lulia versus RWE. There are many disputes that illustrate climate change litigation. Among the famous are Legari versus Pakistan, Massachusetts versus EPA, the Urgenda case also. But I have chosen today to talk about Lulia versus RWE as an example. This case, it was brought by a Peruvian farmer, Luciano Lulia, who felt that his plantation was threatened by flood that could occur as a result of the melting of a glacier in his hometown, that is Huaraz, Peru. The company, RWE, is accused of having historically emitted greenhouse gas that influenced the climate situation and could lead the farmer to lose his property. In December 2016, the court rejected Lulia's requests. It claims that there is no direct causal relationship between RWE gas emissions and the impacts on the glaciers. But in 2017, the appeals court recognizes the possibility of the request and proceeds with the demand. So far, the evidential phase is still going on, and it aims to investigate first if Lulia's home is threatened by the melting glacier. Second, if the risk can be attributed to the company. Although there is no conclusion yet, this example illustrates two important aspects. The first is that climate change litigation is advancing globally, and the second is the recognition of the possibility of the causal link may indicate a future recognition of that responsibility in a global level. And We have up to now most cases and studies on the subject that have focused on what we call the Global North. In the Global North, we saw the emergence between 2007 and 2013 of more than 600 cases. Most of them are in the United States, but in addition to these, there are also cases in Australia, United Kingdom, European Union, and New Zealand. These cases have a similar configuration. Among the players are citizens, who can be individually, in groups, or even in non-governmental organizations. Industry and government appears also as players. And among the petitioners, the vast majority are citizens, especially property owners and community groups. And among the respondents, more than 90% of the cases were suited against governments. But what if we look for a global south approach? It's interesting to analyze what we have for climate change litigation by a global south approach. Immediately, we note a much smaller number of cases and studies on the subject. But there are some similarities between the cases of the global north and the global south. In both cases, we see that litigation has a role in calling governments to action. There are still some aspects that are more visible in the global south. When we look to the global south, we see a greater tendency to connect climate cases with human rights cases, taking advantage of the issue of the geographic location. In addition, there's also a great concern regarding the impacts and vulnerabilities by the affected populations, especially as the global south, as we know, is more vulnerable and has fewer resources to deal with the negative weather effects. And here I like to present a theory to analyze this phenomenon of climate change litigation. It's important to say that there are many theories that propose the elements for climate change litigation research. One of the main theories about this is proposed by Professor Harjozovsky in her series of articles that we call Geography of Climate Change Litigation. In these articles, she proposed an approach called Law and Geography. It uses the concept of place as a reference to study the climate issue. The concept of location and place is important because both the actors and the claims can be linked to this geographic location. In this sense, it's possible to analyze the ties or connections to place either by the actors or by the claims. When we investigate the actors involved in litigation, we must have in mind that three spheres. First, the petitioners that are responsible for the filing of the suit, then the respondents that can be responsible for that suit, and finally, the adjudicators, that is, the decision makers who will be responsible for the decision. Each of these elements have a connection special in a different way to the place it is inserted. For example, indigenous communities have a special connection with their territory. It's because of this connection that they seek reparation for the event. Respondents also have special connections to place. For example, in the same country, there may be the ministry in charge of a certain matter, but inside the country there are divisions. For example, agencies, subnational entities, municipalities, etc. The decision maker itself functions because of its jurisdictional bounds over a territory. On the claim side, we have the general requirements for a court action, factus, substantive law, and procedural law. Those elements have also a special connection to place, because the factus take place in a certain geographic territory. Law, both substantive and procedural, say the rules of the game in a specific jurisdiction. So in short, the aim was to show a theoretical perspective for a better understanding of climate change litigation. Of course, there are many others, even produced elsewhere out of the European Union and the United States. but this one, I think it's interesting because it is complete and it brings the intersection of law and geography. And now we can talk about climate change litigation for the BRICS countries. What I will present is the result of a brief study that I did at Climate Change Laws of the World database from the London School of Economics. So first, we have this graph that shows the evolution of the number of climate cases since 1994. We see there is an acceleration wave from 2015, reaching a peak last year with 8 cases that were proposed. This year, which has not ended, we have already 6 cases. As I have said, from 2015 onwards, 70% of the cases occur. This shows that even if we have an accelerating process, there is still room for increased climate change litigation in BRICS countries, especially if we consider the total amount. BRICS countries account for only 31 cases. Of these, 17 are from Brazil. Then comes India with 8 and South Africa with 6. The database doesn't have cases recorded existing in Russia or China. So there is still lots of space for litigation in these countries. And now we talk about the petitioners of BRICS countries. When we analyze the petitioners, we see that 3 out of 4 cases were brought by individuals, which includes obviously single individuals, NGOs, and community groups. Therefore, individuals and NGOs account for 77% of the petitioners. Governments represent 20%, and companies only 3%. Now, about the respondents. When we take a look at the respondents in BRICS countries, we see that 4 out of 5 cases were brought against governments. We see that the trend of government as the respondents is a trend observed also for the global north. So 79% of government companies represent only 18% and individuals 3%. And now we have some challenges. These results, which I have made from the database, are interesting because they detail in what aspects climate change litigation in BRICS countries compares or differs from the global north. However, there are some points still to be researched. The first and most important point is the claim types. Studies from the global north have already detailed what are the main issues that are raised by these suits. This is already systematized and classified, but we didn't have this work for the global south and for BRICS. There are many types of claims, and some ask, for example, for mitigation, others for regulation, others for adaptation. There are also claims about the impact assessment process, liability, human rights. I received the message. Elizabeth, wish to control the distance? No. Deny. So, as I've said, there are many types of claims. Some ask for mitigation, others for regulation, others for adaptation. We also have, for example, claims about impact assessment process, human rights, and liability. Another point still to be studied in a BRICS perspective is the implication of these lawsuits. There is no consensus on how we make this assessment. However, a possible measure is to analyze the process in climate change litigation. So, if the action results, for example, in a more favorable regulation for the climate change, we have a regulatory impact. If the claim results in a less protective regulation and less favorable to the climate, we'll have an anti-regulatory impact. It's important to note that this impact depends, obviously, on the type of action and the characteristics of the jurisdiction and substantive law of each country. And now, we have the third challenging point. Like each case depends on each jurisdiction's unique legislative and regulatory framework. The legal framework of each BRICS country is different, and it has special characteristics. To better analyze it, we must, before have done a complete national study of legal system, understand their structure, to try to analyze how this climate litigation can impact on each national regulation. And now we can move to conclusions. And from this study, I have drew three main conclusions. First, the existing theory on climate change today can be helpful. The approach that investigates connections with place of actors and claims is interesting. It also helps us to understand the specificity of each geographic point. Despite it, the theory has yet to be understood from a global south perspective. This applies, for example, to definitions of climate change litigation, which can exclude, in a point of view before, the litigation in BRICS countries. A second important point is that within the BRICS countries, there's still room for more litigation. Even if in the last 5 years we saw a growth, the total corresponding to these countries is still small if we consider the global perspective. And considering the environmental importance, as well as the geographic, economic, political position, BRICS countries can represent the construction of a more sustainable future, a more sustainable society by the way of climate change litigation. And finally, if we have to talk about litigation players in BRICS, it is possible to see that when compared to Global North, the main petitioners of BRICS countries are individuals. There's a highlight also for the large participation of NGOs, and it can indicate a point of interest for climate action. And more, governments have also some representation as petitioners. And this can show that it can be interesting to rely on subnational government as allies. And regarding the respondents of BRICS countries, the trend observed in Global North was maintained, but most cases were brought against governments, but we also noted that a portion of industry could be responsible could be demanded in climate actions. So it represents one more possibility that opens up for litigation in BRICS countries. And here I'd like to show the references I used to make this presentation. And finally, I'd like to thank you a lot, everyone here. I'd like to thank you, the other panelists too. And I leave my contact and email for questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. And it's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor, for the excellent lecture. Now, Professor Sergei, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me demonstrate the presentation. Right, hope you see it. So first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to Professor Casella and the University of São Paulo. It's a really pleasure for me, and it's a great honor to present my thesis here. So it's named The Development of the Green Economy in the BRICS Countries Within the Framework of the Global Trend. Here you can see my email. You can also add me on Facebook. So I'm always open for any fruitful discussion and cooperation. So the issue of the green economy has returned to its agenda with the Joe Biden's administration and the COVID-19 pandemic. So now I would like to show you several numbers that shows that how a COVID-19 pandemic influenced the economic growth, and of course the green economy agenda. So, for example, here you can see how much the emissions of CO2, the material use, the air pollutants dropped drastically because of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's the issue that pursued the green economy back on its agenda. So here you can also see the cumulative CO2 emissions here on this slide. So you can see that it really dropped drastically, and that's the issue. So the COVID-19 pandemic, it has a very short and long-term effects on microeconomic activity, and as well as on the structure of the economy. The structure of the economy plays a key role in how economic effect translate into effect on environmental pressure. So it's obvious, actually. The short-term reductions in environmental pressures are significant. Energy-related emissions declined by 7%. Agriculture-related environmental pressures about 2%. The reductions in the use of non-metallic minerals and including construction materials reached double digits. So there is a projected long-term and potentially permanent effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, the downward impact on the levels of environmental pressures of 1, maybe 3%, depending on the indicator. So a slow recovery can double these impacts. So what is green economy itself? So first of all, if we speak about green economy, it's of course about resource efficiency. So it's about achieving greater well-being while reducing resource use and emissions. Of course, green economy, it's a macroeconomic approach, and it focuses on investing in green economic activities, infrastructure, and skills. And of course, it's about the capacity of building and mainstreaming the eco-efficient production and responsible consumption for behaviors. So we also know that there is 3 components for every good that is produced in the world. It's energy, first of all, and that's why I'm going to talk about the energy use of BRICS countries. So we will stop on every BRICS country. Then we will discuss the New Development Bank and its role in green economic activities, in green economy itself. And of course, we will talk about conclusions. So key points and figures for all BRICS countries. So we know that BRICS countries contribute 42% of CO2 emissions in the world. And according to the forecasts by the BRICS Energy Research Platform, fossil fuels will account still about 70% for the energy balance by even 2040. So if we speak each country, so Brazil is going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 43%, and Russia will limit its anthropogenic greenhouse gases only to 2030. India will reduce emissions by 33-35% by 2030. China is going to lower the carbon dioxide emissions per unit, I guess by 60-65%. And South Africa is going to lead emissions by 2025 to range between, so you can see the numbers, so almost 400,000 of metric tons of CO2. So it's great goals for every country, especially if we consider their energy consumption. Actually, since 2015, BRICS countries' potential contribution to sustainable development has been expanded, and it really relies on two groups of tools. First of all, it's their international potential and their international cooperation for the green economy, and of course they might contribute to sustainable development through their national practices. So if we speak about Brazil, actually Brazil is, I think, the first country if we speak about green economy, and if we speak about their contribution to this reduction of CO2 emissions and so on and so forth. So Brazil commits to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions in 2025 by 37% in relation to 2005. Brazil is going to reduce its emissions by 43% in 2030. So you can see that if we speak the consumption of energy, the renewables share about 80% in the electricity supply. It's the greatest number, and the greatest number if we speak about BRICS countries. So the solid bioenergy share about 40% in industrial energy consumption, and the net bioenergy share about 20% in transport consumption. So what I really like about the Brazil, first of all, the target refers to absolute emissions rather than relative factors. And the second point is that these numbers, they addresses the economy as a whole, not only to specific sectors. So if we speak about the target, I have spoken about, I mean, the reduction of for 37%, it's really above of those of many developed countries. And of course, Brazil includes an intermediate target for 2025, forcing a lower emission path throughout the decade, not only 2030. So the strategy is quite good and it's developed well. In order to build the energy of the future, Brazil is acting on two main fronts. The first one is creating the conditions to accelerate investments in clean energy based on nature and competitive technologies. And the second front is that the Brazilian government's action has been reinforcing the foundations of new technologies and business models that will be necessary to maintain the speed of decarbonization in the next decades. It means that it's guiding investments and providing resources for research, development, and innovation. Also for training the qualified professionals, both for private and public sectors. If we speak about the energy supply by source in Brazil, we can see it here, the percentage share, and we can see that the renewables get almost half of total energy supply. That's the greatest number, actually, and it's the biggest number within BRICS countries. So this is Brazil commitment green economy. Sorry, I have already mentioned it. So once again, the target refers to absolute emissions, and it addresses the economy as a whole. So the Brazilian approach here is the most profound one, and I think that all these targets will be achieved right when they are going to be achieved. So the next one country is Russia. Actually, Professor Casella just in the beginning mentioned that I have to provide the Russian view on green economy and its strategy. To be honest, Russian government thinks that the green agenda is one of the tools that hinders the development, both economic and political. And to be honest, we don't pay much attention to renewable sources of energy for years. Even the eco-trends here in Russia, they were raised from people, not from the government. And it really included different kind of protests in several regions against, for example, current waste management system and air pollution. So it's a big problem here in Russia. We also have quite weak legislation. And if we speak about national practices, only a couple of years ago, Russian government started to perform the reforms for green sector, and these reforms affect both the people and the economy. After the Russia-US summit that was held in 2021, Russian authorities, they really realized that the real economic threat comes from carbon footprint tax, especially if we speak about the gas and oil supply. So that's going to be a real challenge for Russian government. And if we speak about the characteristics of Russian green economy, first of all, we are net exporters of oil, gas, and coal. We don't have any developed renewable sources of energy, even in the south of Russia. So the main goal, first of all, is to develop the energy efficiency. And that's the new information, actually. The new strategy to be accepted, it was published 1 week ago. So we are going to achieve the country's carbon neutrality, by 2060, 79% reduction in greenhouse gas by 2050. Actually, these numbers show that it's a long way to go for Russian government, for Russia, the country. And I think that these numbers, of course, they will be changed soon. Because we have to develop this part of our economy. So if we speak about the energy consumption, we can see here that despite we have many rivers, the hydroelectricity is not developed here. So most of our economy consumers consume gas, natural gas. It's more than 50%, and we can see that it doesn't change at all, actually. We also use oil, it's about 25%, and we use coal, but to be honest, we have a great reduction in coal usage in Russia. So if we speak about main cities, St. Petersburg and Moscow, we practically don't use coal here. So the next one country is India. India has already developed an extensive system of measures to stimulate investment in clean energy development and reducing dependence on fossil fuels. So actually, India's strategy bases on 2 points. It's of course investing in renewables and taxing the coal industry, and of course it's investing in people. In 2013. The government of India made it compulsory for the companies to spend 2% of their profits on corporate social responsibility. So this means that India's strategy is based, as I have already told, on 2 main points. It influences on economy, and it influences on people and their welfare. Here we can see in the energy consumption by fuel type in India in 2019, and we can see here that coal gets 45%. So India has also a long way to go to reduce the coal usage, and you can also see here that the biomass and waste energy it also takes 20%, and it's a good number actually. So they're going to develop this direction of energy consumption, and natural gas. It's also going to get a bigger figure here if we speak about energy consumption. So the next one is China, and we all know that it's the biggest CO2 issue in the world. And there is one thing that I would like to talk more about China. It's a Belt and Road Initiative. Actually, the United Nations Development Program and the United Nations Environmental Program has been working to define state-level and strategic partnership to foster Belt and Road Initiative sustainability. So it achieved the China's commitment for the Belt and Road projects, and was first international organization to sign a memorandum of understanding in 2016. And an action plan in 2017 as a framework for cooperation of United Nations and China Joint Working Group. It also was established in 2018. So the Belt and Road Initiative, it shows several contradictory aspects. First of all, it exerts a major impact on environmental issue and economy. On the other side, they change territories and landscapes. They increase the risk of economic transaction and create debt. Moreover, the degree of involvement of local unskilled workforces is rather low. Finally, economic choices are China-led and partner countries operate in subordination. In this sense, it's not about green economy development, it's about the development of the economy of China itself. And its major support is to ensure the provision of natural resources to enlarge the market for Chinese goods. While the Belt and Road Initiative is pursuing sustainable development for partners by means of the Green Initiative, several aspects of the projects, such as international transfer of mineral resources, polluting technologies, together with the limited involvement of local human resources in the management of the projects, they can be seen as a sustainable part of this project. And it comes to decline of environmental and socio-economic point of view. By contrast, the role that can be compared to China's terms of the size and scope of the economic scale. For example, India seems to be employing a more sustainable approach, and that shows us the difference between the approaches of China and India here. So the next is maybe the most important points of China's strategy. First of all, China is based on a circular economy and ecological civilization. It means that this ecological civilization, it's a real politics of China's government, and it was added to the laws in 2018 and supposed to legitimize and promote sustainability policies. So they also exert such strategy called Beautiful China. It's a real good approach to the people's needs. If we speak about green economy, their welfare, and the green economy benefits. So if we speak about the energy consumption in China, we can see that coal takes about 60%, and it's a great number. And we all know that, for example, months ago, there was an energy crisis in China, so they even imported more coal from Australia just in order to avoid this crisis. And it's going to be the biggest challenge for the Chinese economy to get rid of coal usage. And I think it's they won't do this because another way they have to import more gas, more petroleum and other liquids. But actually, it's if you speak about the security of China, it's going to be a great challenge for them. And the last one country is South Africa. So we can see here several points. If you speak about green economy, South Africa is focused on energy, transport, and agriculture. And we know that South Africa has a heavy reliance on coal. That's the biggest issue for them. South Africa's transition to a green economy is articulated in their national development plan, and it includes a series of frameworks, strategies, and policies. You know that if we speak about South Africa, we can see here quite curious numbers. For example, 27% of initiatives of green economy, they are funded by international sources. So the domestically funded initiatives, it's about 70%, 80% of them were funded from public financial sources. And it highlights the role of targeted public finance as a catalyst for investment in green economy sectors. So these initiatives are being implemented by a large number of development partners from public, private, and civil society. So it means that the level of business and people involvement in green economy in South Africa is quite high, and it's much higher than, for example, in Russia. So that's a good thing for South Africa. If we speak about also energy consumption, we can see here that fossil fuels gets about 96%. So this sector of green economy in South Africa is not developed at all. Though they don't have technologies, but they have also good initiatives to develop their green economy. We also know that the heavy reliance on coal will require an ongoing shift towards renewable energy if they want to meet the commitments to reduce national greenhouse effect. And we also know that South Africa exports coal, so they are not going to reduce the coal usage in their own consumption. So it's not economically beneficial at all. So the last thing I would like to talk about is the new development bank. So it's a really good thing, actually. To be honest, it has 73 ongoing green projects. And the thing I like about the new development bank, they have a financial and technical expertise of projects for sustainable infrastructure development. So they give money only for green projects. I know several projects, for example, New Development Bank gave a loan to Russian government to improve the ecological situation in the Volga River. It's the biggest river in Europe. Also, I like the project approval formats. So the projects that are quite developed and that are very easy to be understood and to their economic effect is quite obvious. So they are approved without any requirements. And if we speak about very difficult projects, of course, they are expertised, and that's why this bank is the only bank in the world that has such kind of expertise in the sustainable infrastructure development. So if we speak about BRICS countries overall, the new development bank can be the idea that BRICS countries can offer to the world. So we can expand this expertise of sustainable infrastructure development projects all over the world. And of course, it comes to us to common development goals. First of all, BRICS countries, they really build sustainable and efficient energy systems. They try to diversify the energy balance and supply structure to ensure uninterrupted and affordable energy supply, so that it can meet domestic energy needs and create a favorable environment for sustainable economic growth. Next one, they expanded access to energy to ensure energy security of the population. And it's a big deal actually for India and for Russia. So to improve living standards and ensuring social stability. So the maximum efficient utilization of domestic available energy resources. So that's why several countries such as Brazil and India use biomass energy. They also try to create clean and low carbon energy systems to reduce the negative impact on the climate and environment. And of course, all BRICS countries, they really invest in biodiversity, waste management, and environment, so that it affects people's life. So the point here is that BRICS countries doesn't have any strategy for developing the green economy itself. But they really focus on two main aspects. They try to, first of all, to develop the social benefits for human, beings, so that they really try to provide the people living in these countries with waste management system, with biodiversity and the environmental issues. And of course, they focus on economy and the energy consumption. So they try to diversify all the energy resources. And of course, it's a long way to go. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them.
Thank you, thank you, Professor Sergei. Professor Elizabeth, you can talk, or you still have a technical issue? In the meanwhile, she connects the audio. I would like to make a question of the audience from Suzanne. How can BRICS countries work together in Glasgow to obtain a stronger committee against the climate change? A strong commitment. Anyone like to start?
Sorry, I can't hear you properly. Could you please repeat or type the question?
Yes. How can BRICS countries work together in Glasgow to obtain a stronger commitment against climate change?
So thank you for the question. Actually, I think that it's not the time for joint cooperation here, because we all see that the COVID-19 pandemic influenced much on the energy consumption or on the energy balance of each country. So first of all, they have to protect their own countries, their own economies, and their own people. As I have already mentioned, they can use New Development Bank and its projects in green economy to provide technical expertise for the same projects, not only in the BRICS countries, but for example, in the country of G20, just to start. Otherwise, they can also focus on some African countries so that they provide financial resources for green projects. So that's my opinion.
Igor, any consideration?
Yes, thank you for the question. I agree with Professor Sergei. And if we say by the Brazilian side, we have a very complex and complicated political situation that where there's no space, unfortunately, to make stronger commitments, I think. And also the pandemic have influenced so much, and I really don't see any space, at least for this year or for the next couple of years, to make stronger commitments. Unfortunately, I don't know if Professor Paulo has any consideration to say about the Brazilian side.
Oh, I doubt we can manage to have a joint position in Glasgow this Sunday and onwards in the conference. I guess we have to set straight the position of Brazil in this matter, and probably this will be confronted by several other countries during the conference. But if you allow me a short question, Sergei, I remember 2 years ago when we attended together the seminar in St. Petersburg, you talked about blue economy. Today you talked about green economy. What is the main difference between these two approaches?
So thank you for a question. Actually, yes, and I think that in 2 years I will talk about another color of economy. You know that somehow a blue economy can be a part of a green economy approach. If we speak about blue economy, it really considers the use of ocean resources, of water resources, and all the aspects that are going together, such as tourism, infrastructure development, for example, vessel construction, and so on and so forth. But it's so much joint approaches if we speak about the energy consumption. Because, for example, you know that on the Brazil you have, if I'm not mistaken, about 80% of oil and gas, they are offshore. So you also have a law that forbids when you get the oil from the offshore sources, you have to transport the gas to the shore, so you can't combust it. So it's actually it's a great issue if you speak about environmental effects. So my answer is that there is these approaches, they differ if we speak about the whole economy. So the green economy approach takes the economy as a whole, and the blue economy takes only part of it that considers ocean resources, water resources, tourism infrastructure on the onshore, for example. But there are lots of questions, lots of issues that combines the green and blue economy approaches. So it really works like this always.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I think the professor is connecting again. Please, professor, if you succeed, interrupt us, but meanwhile, we will still have some questions that we can do to the audience still entertain. Diego Amorim asks, energy demand increasing all over the world. Even the development of renewable energy is constant. It is not enough in the BRICS countries. Is an energy crisis in BRICS countries already a concern? Someone wants to start the answer or want to ask again?
Could you repeat, please? I think I have some problems with my connection.
Okay.
Sorry, please.
Professor Elizabeth, you are able to talk right now. The question is, energy demand increase all over the world. Even the development of renewable energy is constant. It is not enough in the BRICS countries. Is an energy crisis in BRICS countries already a concern?
To be honest, I don't think that energy crisis will boost up the development of renewable sources of energy and all kind of these technologies, because it's very long-lasting projects. So if we speak about the creation of new technologies, it can take about 5-10 years to be developed, and we also know that we need the energy right now, right here. So, for example, I know that China imported, if I'm not mistaken, 25% more of gas and oil from Russia in September than in August. So, and they're going to import more. It means that if BRICS countries have the possibility to import more so-called standard and old sources of energy, such as gas, oil, coal, for example, they will do it because it's much cheaper and it's much quicker.
We have a problem with the audio of Professor Elizabeth, and I will call her and play the audio by my audio so she can present. She will start her presentation in a moment.
1 minute, please.
You can hear her?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
I see Sergei Kirillov. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Do you hear me?
Yes, Professor.
And the others also hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So about the about the BRICS and the environmental problems. We have to share, we have to mention, of course, the importance of Brazil and his natural resources. 60% of the forests, starting by the forests, 60% of the rainforest is in Brazil, which is a major part of it when you take into consideration that Peru has 13%, Colombia 10%, and the other countries such as Bolivia, Ecuador, they have even lesser percentage of the Amazon forest. In reality, the Amazon just covers more than half of the planet's rainforest is still remaining. And also the largest and most biodiverse tropical forest in the world, with more than 390 billion trees divided, that we can divide it in not less than 16,000 species of trees. And among the tropical forest, white tropical forest, Brazil has the richest biome and more species than the west forest we find in Africa and Asia. Since the largest part of tropical forest in Brazil is in 1 minute, please. Now, I want to go back to the text. Not share screen. Okay. It's important so that Brazil has the largest collection of living species in we found them in the Amazon rainforest. The Amazon rainforest is home to about 2.5 million insect species, tens of thousands of plants, and 2,000 different species of birds. As to the plants, to the vegetables, at least Brazil has the Amazon forest, at least 40,000 different species of plants. The same, we can say, the same number of that prove the importance of the Brazilian Amazon forest. We have more than 2,200 species of fishes, more than 1,200 birds, around 427 different species of mammals, 428 amphibians, and also more than 378 reptiles have been studied. One number that I think it's impressive is that one of each 5 species of bird is found in the Amazon rainforest. 1 of 5. And the same as to the fishes. 1 of 5 species of the fishes live in the region, in the Amazon rivers and streams. This also has an importance as to the, for instance, the number of species of invertebrates, not only in the Amazonian region, but also in Brazil. And Brazil has something between 600,000 and 128,000 invertebrates. This biodiversity is also reflected in plants. Brazil has the highest biodiversity when it comes to plants. The highest in the earth. And studies show that studies made in the Equatorian rainforest show that in 62 acres, more than 1,100 different tree species can be found. One study made in 1999 showed that 1 square kilometer of the Amazon rainforest can contain about around 90,709 tons of living plants. And the average of biomass plants is estimated between 356 and 347 tons per hectare. As to the number of tree species in the region, we have around the study estimate around 16,000 different species of trees. Sorry. But all this biodiversity, this rich and impressive biodiversity that we found just in the Amazon forest is, as we all know, threatened. The threats are mainly deforestation and, especially in the last decades, fires. We have seen in the last weeks exactly we have seen that the fires have exactly this terrible effect in the Amazonian forest over the plants and also the species, the vertebrate species. They have been seriously damaged by the fires we see in the Amazon set by agricultural demands or other reasons. And this also, we have also mentioned when we come to the people, the Amazonian people, that we have different ethnic groups living in the Amazon. More than 350 different ethnic groups. The Amazon population is divided between 9 different national systems and around more than 3,300 indigenous territories have been recognized in the Amazon area. for reason by what the indigenous people is deemed as forming around 9% of the total groups of 60 groups already now. 9% of these groups still remain isolated. One of the most important or the most important damages to the Amazon forest is deforestation. And the deforestation in the Amazon forest are due to primarily human settlement and the development and of the land for agricultural use. Until 2018, which means until 3 years ago, about 17% of the Amazon tropical forest had already been destroyed. So this is a serious problem in Brazil, because as we all know, deforestation terms forested areas in non-forested areas. It have an impact not only in the area destroyed, but also in the climate, the weather, and other related ecosystems. For instance, the savanna. Until 1960, the occupation of the forest, the interior areas of the forest were restricted, and for that reason, the forest remained intact, or basically intact, for a long time. But from the 60s till today, the culture of crops resulted in the use of the burn method to produce land that could be used for farming and crops. One point, however, is interesting. Indeed, 2 points when we are talking about the forest, the Amazon forest. The capacity of production in agriculture is does not last for a long time, and for this reason, we had another negative phenomena, that is the constantly moving of farmers search for new areas and These farming practices led to the deforestation. And today, when we cross the Amazon area by plane, we can see vast areas of cleared forest to make visible to naked areas. Sure, the Transamazônica Highway was viewed in the 70s as welcomed and widely celebrated in the governing areas. But the Trans-Amazonian Highway came to represent a major threat to Amazon rainforest. When from the other side we have to thank the nature and also the inability of the authorities to finish, to complete the Trans-Amazonian Highway, because without completing it, we can see there is a limited environmental damage. Yet, another threat went to the Amazon region between the 1991 and the year 2000 with the intensive use of the Amazon area for pasture for cattle. This had an impact. It is certainly a negative impact, and because of the pastures and the cattle importance the cattle acquired, the total area of the Amazon forest lost since the 70s to now is around 587,000 square kilometers. So we have today 91% of the deforested area in Amazon used for pasture, for cattle pasture. And this has effects, negative effects in the volume of rain and the loss of the high loss of other areas deforested and improper for agriculture, which lead us to conclude that Brazil had no economical advantage from the use of the rainforest for for pastoral fields. Another threat in the Amazon area that we see now is in this acquiring importance is the farmers that are using the Amazon soil to soy plantations, to many projects, most of them financed by public and also private Brazilian banks, Brazilian institutions have contributed to this increased settlement and the roaring deforestation now that now has as reason the soy plantations. And for just to give you a number, the annual deforestation area of the Amazon from the year 2000 to 2005 rose to 22 and some square kilometers, and was 18% higher than in the period between 1995 and 2000. Despite the declining of deforestation to problems, to difficulties found by the agricultural workers and the farms, deforestation in the Amazon, especially in the Brazilian Amazon area, continue to increase. The fossil fuel reservoirs discovered in the Amazon rainforest led to another damaging activity, the oil drilling activity in the Western Amazon that has grown from the 1970s to the year 2000. The use of the Amazon area by oil companies has another dramatic consequence, because these oil companies need roads and opened hundreds or even thousands of kilometers of new roads during the last 20 years to facilitate the access of the trucks and the transportation of by the trucks to reach agreement celebrated between the Mercosur and the European Union with the aiming to form one of the largest free trade areas in the world has produced negative effects that have been denounced both by environmental activists and indigenous rights campaigners. They fear, and we all fear, that this deal between Mercosur and the European Union could accelerate the deforestation in the Amazon area, as they will need to expand the access of the merchandise to the rest of Brazil, especially the beef market. So we have a terrible picture in the Amazon in this moment. In 2021, just in this year, it was reported just along this year that for the first time the Amazon area emitted more greenhouse gases than it used to absorb. This has an impact. This has a negative effect, not only in that area, but also in the Earth's oxygen, because the studies calculate that at least 1/4 of the Earth's oxygen was produced in the Amazon area. But the misuse of the statistic of misuse led some scientists, some studies to affirm that unlike it had been previewed, the net contribution of the Amazon ecosystem is now around 0. Yeah. So we have a dramatic situation in the largest forest in the American area, and one of the largest forests in the world. And this is unfortunately, this is not good news, as you can see. Still talking about forest, please give me a minute to open the other document. please.
Professor, if you can please conclude,
Sorry?
if you can please conclude the presentation, we'll have not more time to the panel.
Oh, sorry, because I gave more attention to the Amazonian rainforest, but I had a presentation over the other members of the BRICS as to the question around environment. I'm sorry. It took time to open. I'm sorry. Really,
No
I'm
problem,
sorry.
Professor. The lecture was perfect, and I think the other panelists and the audience think that it was very important to know about Amazonia forest. But unfortunately, we have another panel in the sequence, and we need to
I'm
end.
sorry.
No problem. Thank you for your presentation. I want to thank the other panelists too. And remember the audience to confirm the presence in the link in the description. Thank you very much. Next, we have the second part of